Late-night television used to be an escape, a moment to unwind, to laugh, to forget the chaos of the day. But somewhere along the way, something changed. The laughter started to fade, replaced by lectures and political sermons that felt more suited for a news network than a comedy stage. That shift set the stage for one of the most shocking shakeups in modern television. A once beloved host who mocked others without hesitation suddenly found himself at the center of the storm. And this time, the punchline was him. The irony? He wasn't taken down by the government or by some conspiracy to silence him. He was taken down by the very system he once weaponized: the audience, the advertisers, and the invisible contract every broadcaster signs with the public. When you work in broadcast television, you don't own your platform. You borrow it. Since the 1960s, the rules have been clear. The airwaves belong to the public. That means when you broadcast, you do it under one condition: serve the public interest. This isn't Netflix or cable, where content can be as unfiltered as you like. This is broadcast TV, where every word you say is transmitted over public frequencies. And when that trust is broken, the consequences are swift. What began as a routine monologue quickly spiraled into a disaster when Jimmy Kimmel, the very man who used his platform to ridicule others, made a reckless statement that wasn't just unfunny, it was false. There was no attempt at humor in what he said, only arrogance disguised as wit. And that's where Schneider, a veteran comedian who's watched the industry change from the inside out, stepped in to call it out. Schneider reminded everyone that the license to broadcast is not a right, it's a privilege. And that privilege exists only as long as you respect the audience who grants it. The moment a host forgets that, when they start believing their opinions matter more than their performance, they stop being entertainers and start being liabilities. The fallout was brutal. Viewers revolted, advertisers panicked, and network executives did what corporations always do when faced with public outrage. They cut ties. But this wasn't censorship, despite what Kimmel's defenders claimed. No one barred him from speaking. He wasn't arrested. He wasn't silenced by law. He was fired because he broke the one rule television has always lived by: don't make the audience hate you. The network didn't cancel Kimmel to make a political statement. They did it to protect their business. Because when a show stops making money, when the laughter stops, the show stops. And that's where the hypocrisy hit home. The same people now crying free speech for Kimmel had no problem when Roseanne Barr lost her job after a single tweet. The same network that fired her without hesitation suddenly had defenders insisting Kimmel was the victim of some cultural overreach. But where was that outrage then? Roseanne was mocked, shamed, and erased overnight. No apologies. No public support. Just silence. Yet now, because the person at the center of the storm happens to lean the right way politically, the same crowd that celebrated censorship pretends to care about fairness. Schneider didn't shy away from this double standard. He reminded viewers that what's happening isn't new. It's just being noticed now because it's hitting home for the people who thought they were immune. He pointed to the Twitter files, the internal documents proving how the government leaned on major tech companies like Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter to suppress speech it didn't like. It wasn't some theory. It was reality. And yet, the same voices defending those moves are now crying foul over Kimmel's dismissal. The irony couldn't be thicker. You can't build a culture that punishes speech you disagree with and then act shocked when that same culture turns on you. In Kimmel's case, the real dagger came from his own employer. Not the government, not the FCC, but the viewers and advertisers who fund his existence. Hundreds of affiliate stations across the country dropped his show after complaints poured in. The CEO of Nexstar Media, Sean Compton, made it plain: when viewers reject the product goes away. There were no government threats, no secret blacklists, just capitalism at work. A network made a business decision, and like any business, it chose survival over sentiment. The irony runs even deeper when you remember how Kimmel got here. In the early years of his career, he was a comedian, edgy, sharp, funny. But over time, he stopped being a late-night host and started playing the role of political pundit. What began as playful jabs turned into predictable rants. The more partisan he became, the smaller his audience grew. Comedy thrives on surprise, but Kimmel became predictable. Every joke had the same target, every punchline the same message. The laughter wasn't shared anymore. It was divided. Contrast that with Johnny Carson, the man who defined late night. Carson could joke about anyone, left or right, and the audience would still laugh together. Nobody knew his politics because he kept the focus on what mattered: humor. Families would gather late at night, climb into bed, and laugh as one. That was the magic of Carson, unity through laughter. Today, that kind of comedy feels like a relic. Late-night hosts have traded connection for applause lines from one half of the country. And in doing so, they've lost what made their predecessors legends. When Schneider spoke about Carson, he wasn't being nostalgic. He was issuing a warning. Once a comedian starts believing they're a moral authority, they stop being funny. And when that happens, they stop being useful to the very networks that employ them. Kimmel's downfall isn't just a story about one man's arrogance. It's the story of an entire industry that forgot what made it beloved. Late night used to bring people together. Now it tears them apart. In the end, Kimmel's story is less about censorship and more about consequence. Free speech gives you the right to speak, but it doesn't guarantee a paycheck. It doesn't promise immunity from backlash. It doesn't entitle you to a primetime platform. If you want to speak freely without consequences, buy your own network. Otherwise, every word you say comes with a price, and eventually the bill arrives. That's what makes this story both poetic and tragic. The man who once mocked others for losing their platforms now stands in their shoes, learning the hard way that every spotlight burns when you forget who controls the switch. It wasn't the government that silenced him. It was the same audience he took for granted, and maybe, just maybe, that's what late night needs. A reminder that comedy, at its best, doesn't preach. It connects. It doesn't divide. It makes us laugh at ourselves instead of making us hate each other. Because when the jokes stop being funny, the show stops being worth watching. So what do you think? Has late-night comedy lost its soul? Or was this fall inevitable? Was Jimmy Kimmel a victim of cancel culture or the architect of his own downfall? Let's talk about it in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more powerful stories and media breakdowns, and turn on notifications so you never miss another one.
The easy